Hey friends, welcome to the Power of Nine podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Eggert. Today's guest is probably one of the most process-driven people I've ever met in my entire life. If you're familiar with the business operating system EOS, he is the definition of integrator. We're going to dig into that and a little bit more with our guest today, Nathan Young. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Hey man, how's it going?
Doing well. It's a Monday. We're recording mid-April on a Monday, and I don't know if I'm going to do that again. I felt like both of us were, when we were getting ready to do this show, I think both of us were coming out of some like heavier stuff. So we need to get this party started today, right?
Right, absolutely. Yeah. It's not even noon yet on a Monday. We're like, should we have done this on Saturday morning instead? Maybe. Right. That's okay. We're going to make it happen. And I got my coffee right in front of me. I'm not using my C9 mug, which is a mistake, obviously. Yeah, because it was in the dishwasher.
Our video listeners or watchers, you're going to see a pair of matching hats, and I appreciate you rocking some swag. So thank you for
this is my favorite hat.
Super fan. Thank you. I appreciate that. Hey, do you remember how we met?
Oh my gosh. I think so. So I specifically was looking for someone who could help do sales coaching, and Justin Cox. I talked to Justin and I was like, Justin, I need this person. This is my major pain. This is where I'm stuck. And he was like, oh, well, you have to talk to Aaron. You should talk to Aaron anyway. But also, if you need help with sales stuff, you should talk to Aaron.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then that pretty much I just reached out, or he made an intro, and then the rest is history, I think.
I think we did a phone call, and we got along famously because I think we had a mutual respect for each other's skills, which are very opposite of each other.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to do anything that you do. I just want to hear you talk about it.
Right. And the feeling is mutual. All right. So let's talk about so you are not from around these parts. You grew up in Illinois, right on the border of Indiana. And in our prep, you mentioned that you grew up on 40 acres, which is not something I was expecting you to say. Talk to me a little bit about your upbringing and what that was like.
Oh man. Okay. So my parents built their own house. My parents have always been small business owners. They transitioned out of they sold a pair of businesses, a meatpacking plant and a grocery store. And then they were like, oh, we're going to go be self-sufficient. So they bought a mobile home, moved out to 40 acres of nothingness, and bought that from a farmer who had been using the land for, of course, corn and soybeans, because what else do you use it for there? Right. And they were like, okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be self-sustaining. So I lived in a mobile home where our house was being built on this piece of land. Long story short, we did not become farmers.
Right.
So I grew up in 40 acres. We have the creek, I don't know if you've ever read the Sugar Creek Gang, but that was a book. I read that, and I read all of Little House on the Prairie growing up. And I thought that's what my life was supposed to be like. Huh. And the flip side of that was that I was like, no, because by the time I was 6, I played Nintendo instead.
Right.
And I was like, gardening, I respect it, but no.
Not your jam.
No. And it wasn't my dad's jam either. So by the time I actually got old enough to realize what had happened, by the time I was 7, he owned another small business in the town, Georgetown, near us. And he did that. And we rented out all the farmland.
Oh, you did. Nice.
To some other guy who used it for, of course, corn and soybeans.
So you do come from a family of entrepreneurs. So they had grocery store, a meat packing plant, and then now Young's Furniture, right?
Yeah. So my dad, I think, is 75. I'm one of 7 kids. And of those 7 kids, I think 2, 3, 4, 5 of us have our own small businesses now.
Really?
Yep. And I've worked for most of them in some form or fashion, whether for better or worse, mostly worse. And including my parents. And yeah, right now they own a furniture store. But my dad is 75. He's been working since he was 8, had a
Yeah,
paper
right.
route. He's basically worked for someone else like 1 year in his whole life. And then
Wow.
he was like, nope.
Not my thing.
Yep. Nope. And he's worked for himself his entire life. And he's proud of it, and we're proud of him for it. But yeah, it's basically all we've ever known.
What do you think about growing up in that environment made you and your other siblings want to be entrepreneurs as well? What was that vibe?
Honest answer or nice answer?
I want the don't give me the nice answer. That's not fun.
My parents were, the reason my parents transitioned was basically they listened to this hyper conservative radio host in like the 80s, and they were like, oh, we should owe no man anything. We should live off the grid. They like gave up their social security numbers. I like didn't have a social security number till I was like 13, and I had to go get one so that I could leave the country for like a missions trip.
Wow.
I didn't know. So there was a lot of, frankly, just a lot of ignorance around that. But our parents, again, for better or worse, it really instilled a few things in all of their kids. And one was kind of this like deep inset distrust of anyone who can sort of nominally be labeled the man. Like,
so it just gets drilled into your heads at a very young age that this is the way that it's going to be for everyone in this family.
Yes, exactly. The government can't be and should never be trusted. And you always have to like be self-sufficient and do everything on your own. And the small business owner is the backbone of the whole world. And right, all of that stuff. Aside from the fact that I grew up like Southern Baptist and had all these other conservative values surrounding that.
Right.
By the time I was 16, I was like, I'm pretty sure all of this is weird.
Did your friends think like that was because, right, that's not a normal thought process at all, right?
Well, I know it's not now.
Right.
But, I was homeschooled. So like the insulation was strong.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean? And I got lucky because in homeschooling, there's two kinds of homeschoolers. There's homeschoolers, which no one knows. And then there's homeschoolers, and everyone knows.
I think I know what you're saying, and I don't know if I feel like expounding on that.
That's all I need to say. Everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So in that world that you lived in, did you go to college close to home, or did you decide that, okay, I got to get out of here for a little bit?
I started really close to home, this community college in our town. Now, there was a big break in there. So I graduated high school when I was like 13. So I basically graduated. I got a diploma. So we were part of a homeschool co-op that actually you had to take like your AACTs and SATs and whatever. And you had to get, you effectively passed a GED to graduate. So you took all of your standardized tests that let you be like, yeah, I'm actually high school equivalent. So I did that when I was like 13. Also, that was a terrible thing to have done to a 13-year-old. That wasn't like you went through the normal system, you graduated super early, good job, everybody's proud of you. That was like, you'll have a chip on your shoulder about being as if you like skirted reality and you're actually stupid forever. Don't do that to your kids. I like homeschooling, and I had the worst experience with homeschooling ever. Don't do that to your child. Give them a normal ass education. It'll help them.
And I think it's there. Like you're talking about an extreme homeschooling experience where I have friends that have homeschool or do homeschool their kids, and they integrate them into sports and social activities and things like that.
Yeah.
Yours was right. Yours was very isolated. Very different.
Mine was super isolated. So don't do that. I love homeschooling. Don't do it the way my parents did.
There we go.
My parents gave me every chance to hate homeschooling. I still made it out the other side and went, you know what? This could be a good system.
Right.
So I graduated, had this big break in between that and college, basically where I just went to work. I mean, I had a full-time job by the time I was 13 because my parents had a family business. Like there's no such thing as child labor laws.
Right.
If you own it.
And they're your kids.
Right. And they're your kids. Like, I thought working 40 hours a week was like what you did for chores. Everyone does that, right? Like that's normal.
Wow.
Fun fact, not normal. So, but between that and college, I actually had a lot of experience. I effectively became like a general manager by the time I was 16. Like when I got my driver's license, the reason I got my driver's license was because I was switching from riding in the delivery truck with the 40-year-old guy who worked for me.
Weird.
But I couldn't drive, to being the guy who could occasionally drive instead. And like, so that was a whole weird thing. By the time I went to college, I did start at a community college locally. I clearly had the two weird things happening, right? The first one was I had this big chip on my shoulder that I was actually stupid and didn't know it. That's been proven out to be not totally true.
I was just going to say, yeah, give yourself some grace here.
Right. Yeah. I'll give myself a little grace now that I've taken quantitative steps to actually ensure that that's not true. And the other thing was like, so I went in with that sort of chip on my shoulder, but then also I went in having 7 years effectively in between any time of actual like academic level learning.
Mm-hmm.
I would consider myself a voraciously curious person. I was learning lots of things, I've never stopped learning, but the academic learning is different.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this one too, I had never been in a classroom setting before.
Oh,
ever.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Like even homeschooling growing up was just like my parents bought a Becca book, whatever.
Right.
And then they were like, here's the book, do the things. And then they left because they had a business to run.
Right.
So my parents are not as terrible as I'm making them out to be. I love them very dearly. So,
but it's that's a very interesting, very few people have that type of experience, especially coming from, many of our listeners are going to be in the Twin Cities area. That's all the things you just talked about. There's some of that in the rural areas, but then,
right.
Being brought up Southern Baptist and which is clearly not a huge thing here in the Twin Cities, but then also too, just the hyper conservatism and things like that. Like there's just a lot that goes into that building of the DNA of who you are. And I do have this, I'm going to get into this in a little bit because I want to talk about nature versus nurture and how process driven you are and what's made you tick. So I do want to talk about that. I do want to get into your first taste of entrepreneurship, which was Jeans Fit, right?
Well, I mean,
of your own.
My own was when I was 15. I moved out to Indianapolis when I was 15. I lived with my brother. I tried to get an apartment, but I couldn't because I was too young. I looked into emancipation, but it was a pain in the ass, so I gave up. And I started a landscaping company, and it was me, and I had two guys who worked for me eventually. And so I was doing landscaping, and I was selling furniture. And I don't know how this one passed me by, but business went pretty well until it got cold. In fact, landscaping does not work very well in the winter in the Midwest.
Right. You got to get a snowplow.
Right. So that didn't work. So that was my first taste of entrepreneurship and also my first failure as an entrepreneur. My next real taste of entrepreneurship, though, was of my own, was going into consulting. So I actually started college and consulting basically at the same time. One of those things pays you. Right. So I gave up school pretty fast.
Right. And
And also,
you basically went to school for, since you were 13 years old, and so college probably was a little bit of a different experience because you went for business administration, and you basically just went through 10 years of BA.
in my entire experience with college, let me wrap my whole experience with college up in a bow here. I started in my local community college. I had no idea what to expect. I had all these chips on my shoulder, and all these like unfamiliarities, right? The only classroom setting I'd ever been in was driver's ed,
Hmm.
which isn't real school. And so I went in, I just thought I had a lot of preconceived notions. Those were 99% incorrect. One of the most key preconceived notions that I had that was incorrect was that people wanted to like have discussion or collaboration or anything like that. Like the teacher, especially, that's not true. They want you to do your assignment. Shut up. Like, at least my teachers did. So at the
Right.
community college, I went in and that fell apart immediately. Plus, I started consulting at the same time. And I was like, one of these is the worst thing I've ever experienced. And one of these is me being able to do what I already know how to do and enjoy.
Hmm.
I did eventually go back to school. And so I effectively got 0 credits because it was like such a miserable experience. And I intentionally took remedial classes when I walked in because I just had this thing that I was like, uh-oh, I'm actually secretly dumb. Uh, so I had no credits for my whole first year of school. That sucked. I went back to school when I was 26. So this is 7 years later. I went all online. I went to this school called Thomas Edison State University. It's in New Jersey. It's a 4-year accredited university. I went online. I kept a diary of it on YouTube. I got 84 credits in my first year. And I teach other people how to accelerate their degrees now. So I kept this YouTube diary. This was years ago. Accelerated the whole thing, effectively did 3 years of school in 1 year. And I was like, I know I could be teaching this shit.
Right.
And I was doing my projects, like wondering why everything seemed so broken. And they would be like, I remember Marketing 402, which was one of the first courses I took. Because I was able to just like test out of the first couple levels.
Right.
So I take Marketing 402, and the professor and I end up getting into an argument. He calls me, like we start having weekly conversations about real business marketing strategy because that's what I've been doing.
Right.
And my papers don't reflect any of this. So my papers reflect real world. They don't reflect book. So he's giving me bad grades, but he's asking me for advice.
Weird.
It's fucked up. So anyway, I ended up getting a good grade in the class and it was fine and I passed. But the super secret to all of that is that I actually ended up quitting again after 18 months. So I haven't actually ever graduated and gotten my 4-year degree. I have 3 classes left. And that feels super stupid, but now I'm doing things like the Integrator Academy Masterclass, and I'm doing a product strategy sprint through Section 4 and Scott Galloway. And like I got StoryBrand certified last year, and they just all matter more now. But that's like the in a bow about college and like that whole regular route. And so what I learned was this stamp is fine, but I'm so far beyond this in this education. Right. And anyone, it's not just me, anyone who is an entrepreneur, if you want to be in business, managing a business, leading a business, starting a business, doing those things is the education.
Could not agree more. Going to school for entrepreneurship is one thing, but living entrepreneurship is a whole nother. And I mean, I talk about this all the time. I'm a college dropout. I didn't even make it. You went like 10 times longer than I did. I think I made it 3 months. So, right. And it just, the school of hard knocks is you learn so much more from that experience than you do anything else. So yeah.
Did you have the same thing where you started both and then you were like, nah?
I was not mature. I needed to grow up a little bit. I didn't grow up until I was about 22. So I needed about 4 years just to grow up a little bit. And, so I worked and did a bunch of random things for those years and learned a lot, but I didn't know that I was learning at the time. Right. You don't know that stuff. You're just, I don't know.
You're just
It was different. It was just working, right? Just moving through things. One year would go and another year would come. No, it was crazy. And then, yeah. So let's transition over to, so you did start a couple of startups. I didn't talk about Jeans Fit. I'm gonna skip over that one because I think when we talk about this thought process of the role you play within a business as the integrator, you had your paradigm shift when you were at Search Lab. And so the impact that the visionary to integrator relationship can have on a business was what it happened then. Talk a little bit about that experience and why that was so impactful to you.
Yeah. Man, it was. That basically, so I have all of this growing up. I have all of these years of experience as an entrepreneur or working inside of entrepreneurial companies, working inside of family businesses, whatever, and not family businesses. I did some of that too. And this basically was like the game changer. So I get connected to this little growing company. This is while I'm in school. I take a part-time job in a web dev shop. I get connected to this guy, Scott McCabe, and he pretty immediately is like, hey, I want to hire you to run our brand new growing company. Okay, sweet. I'm all in, right? Like transition from little web dev shop to, search consulting agency in Chicago, like next level marketing, next level company, next level leadership, whatever. Like, okay, this is a step up in every form and fashion. And also pay.
Right.
I'm all in. And he had never had an ops dedicated person before, but he was like, I know that we need it. I know that this is the thing we're stuck behind. So my title was actually project manager when I started. And through that, like, I didn't have this language. I didn't have visionary and integrator language all the way up until this point in my life. It had just been entrepreneur and leader and whatever. And sort of everyone was expected to be everything in sort of like hustle culture and all this other bullshit.
Yep.
Good leaders are, and then it was like literally everything under the sun. You have to be everything and you have to do all the work, which of course was impossible, but we all know that now. So I get into this relationship with this guy, and it's like, it really was like rocket fuel. I mean, the company grew 5x. They went from like 25 or 30,000 in recurring revenue a month. We grew up to $1.5 million, like in 12 months or something. So I like set up credit card processing to be partially automated. And the first month I do that, I run $30,000. And I'm like, this is pretty good. And then 5 months later, I'm running $80,000. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is for real. And it really was off the back of this, like, this guy was just like the most super powered front runner dude I'd ever seen, met, heard of. And it seemed crazy to me, but at the same time, like, we were having such a great time and I was enjoying our relationship so much. And that seemed weird because, I didn't have this language then, but we were both living in our strengths, right? So I didn't know all of this until we lost him. And they went through this ownership shift. I didn't understand why things were so different. And the company got totally stuck. And we found traction. I read Traction and Rocket Fuel is like basically my second Jesus moment.
Right.
Like I found Jesus, but then later I found Gino, and it led me to digging into EOS in this big way. And I realized, like, it gave me vernacular for the for the relationship I had. There was a big chunk of time there where I lost touch with Scott because of weird stuff that happened at the ownership level.
Mm-hmm.
But like when I got back in touch with him, like he and I are still friends and we still have a great relationship today. And he really was my champion then. And he still is my champion now. Like he believed in me and recognized that in me, but he already knew who he was too. And he knew what he did and didn't want to do. And that's, I mean, that again, that like when he and I have conversations, we still play in those spaces with each other,
Mm-hmm.
even though we're just friends now, and we don't work together. But like that is still there, and it changed so much. And I was like, oh, this is the thing, right? I have to go get this again.
Yeah.
So that's where I found EOS and the concept of being an integrator and the concept of having a visionary. And I was like, I'll never let this go again. Like I'll chase this down from now on.
Yeah. So are you right now? So you obviously then transitioned out of that organization. Now you have More Leads Online. You've got your own podcast, Home Service Leaders Podcast, which is a great podcast, by the way. You do a good job. I mean, your personality is perfect to have on as a guest here. I can only, our listeners can only imagine how good it is as a host. And so you take all those different experiences and you roll them into what you are now as I think you're doing some consulting now as an integrator. You're co-founder of More Leads Online, and you're the integrator for that organization. So you've got your hands in a lot of different things. And I don't think I've ever met anybody, like I teed up this whole conversation. I don't think I've ever met anybody that is more dialed into that DNA of what the integrator is. And I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier of nature versus nurture. And what do you think that you were born this way? Or do you think that because of your upbringing and the way that you were brought into the business world by your family, that's what guided you to be an integrator?
I think that's a great question. I think if you ask me again in 6 months, I might answer differently. So
Okay.
but I'll do my best to answer the best that I can think of right now. I saw this in the show notes and I've been reflecting on it and hadn't come up with a conclusion. So now I'm going to just whatever I've got.
Let me have it.
I don't think that it was nurture. In fact, I think it was the opposite of nurture. I do think it's natural. Looking back, actually, and this is hilarious because really my relationship with Scott as a visionary and integrator pair, really, once I had that language and that framework, it let me look backwards on a lot of the relationships I'd had in my past and really like unfolded new truth, like about why those relationships had been sort of wrought with frustration potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought I'd been in those positions where I had the titles, general manager, chief of operations, whatever, even when I was like 18. And I was doing that work, but then I would sometimes like I would get stuck behind that person not being a visionary. And I just didn't realize what kind of pressure I was putting on those people. And like, I know that my relationship with my dad was really strained growing up because I know that's what I was like naturally. That's part of the reason I was like so drawn to video games. I basically played my first video game and I was like, this is a closed system. I couldn't have said that about them then, but I knew it immediately. And the comfort I found in that was like, I was freaking 6 years old. Like,
right. So
it was absolutely nature. There was a nature to the process orientation, the systems thinking orientation. I've always wanted to be this way. I've always been this way. Then you have the question of like leaning into it and nurturing it. It was, for me, it was not nurtured. In fact, again, a lot of my relationships growing up, especially my relationship with my own dad, like I'm working in his business. My natural tendencies were a huge strain between us because he was not a visionary. He wasn't a visionary or an integrator. He was just a dude.
Just figuring it out every day.
He was just figuring it out every day. You know, he still uses a paper notes system. Like, I mean, like literally fucking stacks of paper where he has a note on a sheet of paper. That's his management system.
Right.
He totes boxes of
Crazy.
paper stacks back and forth to the office every day. Like, that sounds insane now, but he's been doing that for 50 freaking years.
Right.
And I mean, I was 12 the first time I looked at him and I was like, this is dumb.
Right.
But I couldn't keep more than 2 or 3 tasks in my head at a time. And he thought I was dumb.
Right. Because of we talk about in Coalition 9, the make a difference, and you're a camel, right? And you've got your lists and you're taking them a couple at a time and you're just banging those out. And when you're done with those 2, then you're going to move on to the next 2, and then you're going to move on to the next 2. I mean, that is the epitome of process, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We didn't have any of that growing up. And the idea of thinking beyond the next 2 steps was not in my dad's like mental ability.
Right.
And it shifted a little bit later on in life. And I even remember it was my brother Dave who really took the first shot at looking at me and being like, oh, I think not having you be the guy grinding the floor and actually having you write maybe like a process manual, this might be a thing you could do. And of course it revolutionized, everything we were doing.
Right. But I mean, like, that's you make fun of the fact that like you were brought up, I don't know, I think the word you use is stupid or something like that. I actually think it's on the other side of the whole thought process. It's more on the genius side. Like a lot of this, and as I've spent time talking with you and gotten to know you, it is I can see where you lean more towards the nature versus nurture. I do think that there's nurture helps guide some of those things, but it's the whole your level of common sense is through the roof because you absorb things so fast. It's insane.
But it does drive people crazy. So while I super appreciate that, yeah, it can drive people nuts.
I'll tell you, you and I worked together on a couple clients, and one of those you were showing the process document and it made my brain itch and I was about to lose my flipping mind, and you are like thriving in that area. And but for me, I have such a huge appreciation for that because it's not my skill set. So I think that that's where that visionary integrator mindsets are so different but so complementary. A term that you talk about, and you've said it multiple times in our conversations, and I even saw it on your LinkedIn profile, is that you take great pride in being second in command. I love that. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that one of the really common misconceptions of integrators, and this is also true about visionaries, is that we are the most useful people. So the guy in charge and the second in command guy are like, these are the, this is the luminary and your sidekick. This is the, and so of course they're the people who matter the most.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's right at all. Mm-hmm. I actually think we're more like levers, right? Like levering agents. Like, yeah, we can get things started, and we can energize them, or we can create systems around them. But it's everybody else that actually does the work.
Right, for sure. I agree with that
100%. So that's the first thing. That's a really common misconception, I think, of integrators, is that we're this incredibly rare and incredibly valuable resource. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I don't bring a lot of value unless you already have a mess made that I can come clean up.
Yeah. Your statement of bringing order to disorder.
Right. And so that's part of the reason I've so bought into this idea of being second, is that I'm like, look, both in my natural tendencies and as I've finally realized what those are so that I can nurture them over time. And I spend a lot of time around other integrators now. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the Integrator Academy Masterclass right now, trying to level
Mm-hmm.
myself up, but also gaining experience in that community. I do the Rocket Fuel Q&A and I've done it for months. I've been in the integrator groups since they started 6 months ago. I talk to other integrators on a regular basis, and like we all are kind of in that same boat. Like every every expense should serve the customer, because that's what a business is, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
customers and revenue.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
what a business is.
Mm-hmm.
Customer, like a business is not your bookkeeping. A business is not your legal shit. A business is not all of your people. Like it's not your expenses. Your expenses are not your business.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, as integrators, we serve as expenses. And so if we are expenses that serve the customer, how are we the most valuable? It's because we're bringing order to disorder. Well, there's no disorder if you didn't have somebody there first.
Right. Right.
And that
Or no
person,
one, right, Nathan? Like
well, yeah.
that could be the disorder, is that there's no one with that thought process that brings it, or the mess to be cleaned up, because that person could be just a Tasmanian devil, making all sorts of messes. And then a good integrator needs to come in, clean it up, and then maintain it.
Well, and that's kind of what I mean is like,
Yeah.
if there is no Tasmanian devil,
Right.
if there's no, this is my favorite TED talk of all time. It's only like 2.5 minutes long, but it's basically just like a crazy guy who starts dancing in a field. And then another guy walks up. So he's just like alone, surrounded by other people, and he looks like a crazy guy dancing. And someone's taking a video of it because, of course, why wouldn't you? Like, oh, you have one crazy guy dancing. And then another guy comes up and is like, hey, this is cool. What you're doing is cool. I think I see your idea. Your idea is cool. I'm with you. And that guy, right, makes it safe for everyone else and brings some order,
Right.
because he's dancing, but he's not dancing exactly the same way. And so it translates everything else to everyone else. And it brings this level of order that actually serves the greater population, because then everybody gets to have fun and dance and do the thing.
Right.
And so it makes that transition between one crazy guy dancing and everybody gets to have a great time. If you're not, if you don't have that guy, that middle guy, yeah, that middle guy might be an expense. But that's the transition between one crazy guy dancing and everybody having a great time. And that's why I'm like, I'll never be the crazy guy dancing. I've been the guy a couple of times. If I'm totally honest with myself, I hate it. It's not my greatest strength. And so can I do it? Sure, maybe I can. Will I ever be as good at it as you? Absolutely not. It drains me. It doesn't bring me joy. But hearing your ideas and then thinking, I really like that dance.
Right.
I could bring other people to this dance. We could all have a great time. Like, totally bought in, completely bought into that concept. And I think some of the best integrators, like I said, I've spent a lot of time in this community. The best integrators are thinking very similarly. They're not out for themselves. They know they're going to get whatever it is that they need. But what they're out for is they're looking for their crazy guy dancing, or woman. And they're like, they want to bring that party to that guy dancing. And so I don't know, seeing the reality of that. I know this is a long-winded explanation for this answer,
but good.
Seeing that reality is like, I can't imagine not being so proud to stand behind someone, especially after that's done, right? When like the lights are going down and whatever, the only person that I ever need to look at me and be like, that was awesome, is that guy
or gal.
Yeah, or gal, right? Sorry, I have never worked with I've never worked with a female listener, although I have communicated with a bunch of them recently and have just been shocked by how amazing some of their stuff is.
Yeah.
But I haven't had the pleasure of actually working second to one yet. But yes, that person looking at you and being like, "Hey, thanks." Like, that's it. Like, that's all. That's it. And just so much pride in enabling that for both that person and for everybody who gets to have a great time.
Yeah. So one final question I have for you before we get into the 9 questions, which we'll dig into here in a second. What does the future state hold for you? What do you want to do here in the future?
Oh my gosh. So number one thing is I want to find, of course I have some stuff I'm doing right now. You mentioned like I'm doing some fractional process implementation and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of a skill now for me to run companies up to at least 3 million. I'm kind of at the point in my career now where I've done the 0 to 3 million thing so many times where I'm like, if you can hand me like a good idea and maybe some capital, like I can build you a $3 million company in like a year or two. But the next thing I'd like to do is, interestingly, I'd like to find my spot in sort of this net zero emissions agenda. I think I made this joke to you, but the way I explained it is basically like, I think I can find my place in helping people feel like not as warm.
You said that when we did our prep call, and I thought that was hilarious. And I actually wrote that down somewhere. I didn't put it on my prep notes, but I wasn't going to go away. That is a funny statement. But that's a passion of yours, right? Like you've mentioned that in a few times, and even in the Coalition 9 groups that I sat in when you were talking about things that you want to do in the future. That's something you're laser focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. To the point where I've been talking to Samantha for the last 5 years about buying a Jeep Grand Cherokee for myself. I mean, like rabid. I own a Toyota Camry, and that thing is that shit is beat up. But I drive it with pride, right? Like, right. And it's like a 2003, and that's what I drive. I bought her a new car last year. I still have the Camry, and every couple of weeks she's like, "You've been talking about buying a Jeep Grand Cherokee for 5 years. Why aren't you going to do it?" She actually asked me again this morning, and she was like, "Hey, when are you going to do that for yourself?" I actually looked at her even just this morning and basically said, "I don't think I can justify it anymore. Not until they come out with like the EV models, which they're supposedly going to do next year." But I was like, I don't think I can do this. I think I have to buy an electric car. Like, it is a passion of mine. It's more and more a passion the more I know about it. And I absolutely want to dig into that. And I want to make a difference in that space somehow.
All right. And then, it's still a new concept, right? For a lot of people to think about, and we don't have a ton of connections here in the Twin Cities. So I will put out the Batman spotlight, whatever, for people that work in that world of net zero emissions, that if there's any connections that you can make, we'll close this show out with how people can find you. And I think that's going to be something that it's going to have to go a little bit more on the national side of things, but that doesn't matter. You can always work remote.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'll get on the plane if it's a
For
big
sure.
deal, right? I'm not against getting on the plane. I'm up for that.
All right, man. We're going to get into 9 questions here. I have put together 9 questions for you. Can you confirm that you have no idea what I'm about to ask you?
I have no idea what you're about to ask me. I'll try to keep my requirement in answering super literally every question anyone ever asks me to slightly shortened.
Yeah, the idea behind this is quick fire, so let's not get carried away here. All right. Question 1. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Insanely process oriented.
That is 3 words. And
I told you I'd answer literally.
God, you were ready for that one. All right. What new technology will transform the future? I love it.
My gut instinct says machine learning hasn't gotten there yet, but it's going to.
All right. I actually kind of agree with you on that one. Roughly how many emails are in your inbox right now?
Depends on the inbox, average of 20.
Yeah. So you're do you move them to folders and dump them and keep that thing nice and clean?
Yeah. Emails in your inbox are tasks. If they're sitting in there, it means that there's something to do. If that's that.
Got it. What is one quality in a person that impresses you?
Being bought into the skill they have.
All right. They're really, really leaning into their strengths. I love it. I don't know. I might have to go another direction with this. I didn't know that you grew up kind of off the grid, but we'll see where this goes. Did you have a favorite sitcom as a kid? Did you watch TV as a kid?
No, I play video games.
All
I
right.
still play video games and don't watch TV.
So let's pivot to that. So what was your favorite Nintendo game when you were a kid right in that age 6 area?
The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, which I am currently replaying on Nintendo Switch, is just as fucking good as it was then.
All right, I love it. Where is your go-to for inspiration?
First one is prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is quiet and a whiteboard.
Very nice. Very process driven of you. Yeah. Do you have a to-do list in front of you too right now? And a whiteboard?
I have at least one. How many tabs deep do you want me to open?
Yeah, right. Okay, good. That's the point I was trying to make. All right. Do me a favor. Close your eyes. What is your favorite sound?
The sound of high-heeled shoes on a concrete or cement floor.
Wow. I love that question because you get so many different answers. I'm not going to dig into that.
Secondarily, I have a mechanical keyboard, and I don't know if you can hear it.
Oh, yeah.
Drives my wife insane. I will use no other keyboard. I love the clacking sound. Makes me happy every time.
Oh, that's hilarious. What is one thing that most people would not know about you? I mean, you talked about a lot of stuff here, but what is one thing that most people would not know about you?
Here's something most people who know me know now. Let me give you two answers. The first one is I'm always late. I hate the idea of walking out in the last 10 minutes of a movie so I can go start a new movie. That sounds insane to anyone when I explain it that way. That's how I feel about meetings. Like if I'm all in a meeting, I want to end the meeting completely before I move to the next thing. And so I'm just like 10 or 15 minutes late to fucking everything. It's just more important for me to be totally present in that one thing and then be like, okay, cool. Now we're done. Now I'll move to the next thing.
I love it.
But I think everybody who knows me very well knows that. So the other thing is I have this crazy, insane feeling. It makes me feel insane. Thing called misophonia, which basically means I'm like hypersensitive to specific sounds, which is partially why I have like I derive so much pleasure from those clicky clacky sounds. But also if you chew food near me, like you run a genuine risk of me punching you directly in the face. I can't control it. It's like literally like if I hear people chewing near me, it's my own chewing sounds do it. So I have to have music or something else running. It literally like it gives me a panic attack.
Do you not go to lunch with other people or have dinner with other people then?
I do, but I literally will do this. If I'm having lunch with a person and it's a really quiet space, I will play music or white noise on my phone and I'll explain to them like, I'm so sorry. I know this is weird. I have this insane sounding thing. I can't help it. If I can hear the sound of you chewing, I will scream.
Wow. I've never heard of that. Insane. So I noted for when we can eat in person together.
I've learned to manage it really well, and I'm willing to be awkward about it in order to make sure everybody's okay.
I'm glad you put it out there for people so they do know. That's good. All right. Last question. What is the best single piece of advice you have ever received?
Business is customers and revenue and every expense. So should serve the customer.
Yeah, I love it. You alluded to that earlier. I was wondering if you're going to go back there. There's a couple of things that you said in our conversation that you could have used as the best single piece of advice, but that is a very, very, very good piece of advice.
Yeah. I mean, like it segmented, right? Like that's a great piece of advice, but also like, happy wife, happy life. That's
yeah, right. All that
that's
stuff.
not bullshit.
All
That's
that
for real.
Right. That's all that cliche stuff. It is the truth though. All right. Where, Nathan, where can people find you?
Thanks for asking. NathanSYoung.com is my website. You can find me there. You can get a hold of me there because that contact form does work. You can find me on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. It's basically the only social media that I spend time on. I own MoreLeadsOnline.com. That's the digital marketing company that I own. And finally, if you search bachelor's degree in 1 year and you click the video results, I should be, of the top 10 video results, I should be 4 of them. So you can find me on YouTube if you have any questions about doing your bachelor's degree, accelerating your bachelor's degree, whatever, figuring out academic bachelor's degree type things. Look that up. You can find me on YouTube. Super easy to find. And I love helping people with that.
Awesome. Awesome. And don't forget that you are the host of the Home Service Leaders podcast, right?
Right. Yeah. That's Home Service Leaders is a podcast done and provided by More Leads Online because it was the most valuable thing we could come up with to provide to our customers is people like you talking about how to run
right. For sure. I get it. Yeah. Hey, I've really enjoyed getting to know you over the last year. I do consider you a very good friend. I can't thank you enough for being on the show today, man.
Yeah, you're super cool. Obviously, I'm super happy to have been on it, and hopefully everybody else doesn't get incredibly bored listening to me talk.
That was good. I loved it. You're a great guest. On behalf of Nathan Young, this has been the Power of 9 podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Eggert, and I want to thank you for the privilege of your time. Cheers.